Blog Talk Radio.
So you want your charity to succeed. It's no secret that combining online and offline techniques is the key to modern-day fundraising success, and practical advice is what you need. The Nonprofit Coach with Ted Hart is the perfect place to learn from experts around the world who, along with our host, provide advice you can use. Ted Hart is without a doubt one of the foremost nonprofit thought leaders. Also a successful author, his books cover a broad range of topics from major gift fundraising to use of social media and how to succeed online. Ted lectures around the world, but now he's here for you. From the latest in charity news, technology, fundraising, and social networking, Ted and his guests help you maneuver through this economic downturn in the charitable sector to greater levels of efficiency and fundraising success. Remember, this is a live call-in show. Become part of the show by adding your voice. Call now at 347-324-3080. After the show, you can find all our podcasts at tedhart.com. Just click on radio links. Don't forget to dial 347-324-3080. Now, welcome the host of the Nonprofit Coach, Ted Hart.
And welcome now to the latest edition of the Nonprofit Coach. Thank you so much for joining us. This is probably one of the biggest shows of the year, and that's why we are not at our normal time of 12 noon Eastern starting the show. It is an hour earlier today because today is the big GivingUSA announcement, and we always change our schedule to meet the needs of the folks at GivingUSA because their information is so important. Today we do have on page 2, and don't forget you can call in as the announcer just mentioned. You also can join us over in the chat room. I see some folks over in the chat room. Folks, you can ask questions there. We'll make sure that those get to our page 2 experts. You also can email me today at tedhart@tedhart.com. Today we have Peter Fissinger and Greg Carlson joining us on page 2. They are our experts today. It will bring us the big first-in-the-nation announcements of the GivingUSA 2013 reports. This, again, is Ted Hart, your host of the Nonprofit Coach. Today is Tuesday, June 18th. This is the latest edition of the Nonprofit Coach. I'm coming to you live today from Los Angeles, California. As always, here on the Nonprofit Coach, we start with page 1 news. First up here in page 1 news, and don't forget you can join us, follow along with our radio links today by going to tedhart.com and click on radio links. First up is we have a bit of a battle of the Titans here on the Nonprofit Coach radio show. The number 1 shows so far for the last 12 months, K Sprinkle Grace has pulled back into the lead, the most popular podcast here for, actually this is for all time. Now it happens to be that the 2 top shows are within the last 12 months, but these are the top shows of all time. K Sprinkle Grace is now in the lead, the most popular podcast, but only 2 listens behind her, and that's why I say the battle of the Titans here on the Nonprofit Coach is Penelope Burke in the Cygnus Donor Survey, and she was with us June 26, 2012. So those are our 2 top ladies here, the 2 top podcasts of all time here on the Nonprofit Coach. We're providing you links to both of those shows. In addition, as you go through the radio links, you will find the top 10 shows of all time. Those 2 are battling it out for the top spot. So why not take an opportunity over the next few days to have a listen to those 2 absolute titans. Again, K Sprinkle Grace with her holiday strategies, and Penelope Burke with the latest information from the Cygnus Donor Survey, the 2 top shows of all time here on the Nonprofit Coach, and they happen to take place within the last year. Next up here on the Nonprofit Coach, you will also find over in the radio links, we've got some best of news and some worst of news. Shame, shame, shame on the 50 worst charities in the country. Center for Investigative Reporting has a report out on the worst charity in the United States, Kids Wish Network. Shame on these folks. Every year they raise millions of dollars, supposedly in the name of dying children. Every year it spends less than 3 cents on the dollar helping kids. Most of the rest gets diverted to enrich the charity's operators and the for-profit companies that Kids Wish hires to drum up donations. In the past decade, it reports that Kids Wish has channeled nearly $110 million donated for sick children to its corporate solicitors. An additional $4.8 million has gone to pay the charity's founder and his own consulting firm. So really shame on Kids Wish Network. But they also go on to point out that the 50 worst charities in America devoted less than 4% of donations raised to direct cash aid. So this is really not the best of America and really puts a black eye on all of us who are out there working so hard, and certainly is the counterbalance to the fantastic news that we'll be getting today of so many hundreds of thousands of people across this country who are working to do good, to support important charities that are really changing lives. We're also going to share with you today the great news. The San Diego is once again named the top philanthropic city in the United States by Charity Navigator. This is an organization that analyzes and ranks the nation's charities. For the fourth time in 9 years, San Diego ranked number 1 on the group's Metro Market Study, which evaluates the state of philanthropy in 30 U.S. metropolitan markets. This is a big leap over last year's study when the city ranked 19th. So bravo to the folks who are in San Diego, who are being so philanthropic. No doubt you've had a big hand in the announcements that will be made by GivingUSA today right here on the Nonprofit Coach. The other top 5 cities in the 2013 list, bravo and congratulations to the fine citizens of Houston, Kansas City, Cincinnati, and San Francisco. And next up here on the Nonprofit Coach, I want to bring a good friend here onto the show who has some DVDs that he's been working on, a series of training sessions with some of the top experts in nonprofit philanthropy. Christopher Davenport is here live with us. Hello, Christopher. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Ted?
Christopher, thank you so much for joining us here on the Nonprofit Coach. Just briefly, I wanted to ask you to sort of bring my listeners up to speed on what's the project that you're working on. And I know specifically you have one of our top-rated podcasts here on the show. Tom Ahern has been working with you on a DVD set. So tell us all about that and how people can access your good work.
Well, Tom and I, this project started a couple years ago because we were, I do a weekly video series called Movie Mondays, and a lot of people would say they were having a hard time communicating with donors. And just looking at how, and I'm sure you've seen this, looking at how people communicate with donors, they're not, even though they know they need to be donor-centric, a lot of organizations don't know exactly what that means. And I'm sure you were saying earlier that Penelope Burke is one of the top podcasts for you, and she preaches donor centricity. So Tom and I created, since he is a world-renowned expert in this area, we created a DVD series with him going through his techniques of what people can do to be truly donor-centered. And I was reading this morning about the GivingUSA report, and they were talking about how 40% of the organizations that they surveyed said they were going to do things differently this year. They were going to raise money differently this year. And what Tom found was that when he talks to organizations about donor centricity and how to do it, how to change your language, people stepped up and they changed how they talked to donors, and they were able to increase fundraising by not just little leaps and bounds, but huge leaps and bounds. I mean, up to 1,000% change in fundraising. So we're hoping that these DVDs really help nonprofits up the ante and bring in so much more revenue than what they're used to bringing in now. And as far as getting the DVDs,
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, that's fascinating. I think we have a lot of listeners today that certainly are here at mid-year looking at what can they do to move that needle. And, of course, one of the big announcements today, of course, is GivingUSA. We're going to really ponder all of the data today, both the good and maybe the troubling today. So anything that can be done to help our listeners be more successful in their fundraising, I think, is helpful. So how can they access the work that you and Tom have been doing?
Well, my site is 501videos.com, so you can go to www.501videos.com/tom-special.html. And we're doing an introductory special at the moment, so you can get the DVDs for half off plus free shipping today, and you'll be on your way to raising more money and retaining donors for the lifetime of your donors. It's great.
Well, that's great. Well, and this is part of a broader series, as you said, 501videos.com. What are some of the other topics that folks will see are covered when they go to your website?
Earlier this year, we launched the Donor Retention Project, and we've got donor Roger Craver, we've got Adrian Sargent. We have so many world-renowned professionals on that as well that are experts at donor retention. We also have 100 donors in 90 days, where we also have another set of really great, well-known experts on how to bring new donors into an organization. And these are all series that have grown out of the questions and the desires of people in the nonprofit world that email me saying, hey, can you do something about this? And so really it's kind of customer-generated ideas as far as the products that we put out to help people raise more money and retain donors longer.
Right, and of course the focus always is helping our listeners make sure that they have the very best advice. In some cases it's from folks that maybe they can't afford to hire themselves as consultants because these are the top folks, and they tend to be very busy and they do the best they can on fees, but they can tend to be outside some budgets, and this puts them within reach.
Exactly.
Well, Christopher Davenport, 501videos.com, thank you for coming on the Nonprofit Coach, sharing us the wonderful work that you're doing, and particularly today, our good friend Tom Ahern, who is one of the top podcasts of all time here on the Nonprofit Coach. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. You're welcome. Thank you, Ted.
Take care. We're wrapping up Page One News today just to draw attention to our newsletter. You'll find over in our newsletter, as you know, we do host the People to People Fundraising LinkedIn group. That group now has over 2,347 members. So you can go over to P2P, the letter P, the number 2, the letter P, fundraising.org, and you can sign up for free on the LinkedIn group and make sure that you are getting the newsletter here for the Nonprofit Coach. You'll also find over in the newsletter today that we have over 2,072 followers on Twitter. We do use Twitter to make sure that you get up-to-the-minute information about the Nonprofit Coach, our guests, and future shows. With that, it is time for us to delay no further. Make sure that we get over to the big announcements from GivingUSA. We're on our way over to Page 2. Our first guest here on the Nonprofit Coach for Page 2 to make the announcements for GivingUSA 2013 is Peter Fissinger, President and Chief Executive Officer at Campbell Company. Peter has 27 years of professional experience in institutional advancement, including designing and implementing major capital fundraising strategies, annual giving programs. He's known throughout the industry as one of our top leaders. Peter has worked with organizations whose campaigns have ranged from $5 million to $5 billion. Peter chairs the Advisory Council on Methodology for GivingUSA and serves on the board of the Giving Institute. He's a past president of the Chicago chapter of the Association of Fundraising Professionals and goes on and on with his very strong background. But most importantly, he is here to make announcements about GivingUSA. Peter, welcome here on the Nonprofit Coach.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Peter, we are absolutely honored here on the Nonprofit Coach. This is the third year that the fine folks at GivingUSA at the Giving Institute have chosen to use the Nonprofit Coach as one of the first announcements of the big numbers coming out of GivingUSA. We all know that GivingUSA is the gold standard of information and data regarding philanthropy throughout the United States. So again, thank you for joining us here. We also have a colleague of yours here on the show. Again, we're honored to welcome Greg Carlson. He is the chair of the GivingUSA Foundation. He's our special guest today, president of Carlson Fundraising. Greg has 25 years of development experience and is president of the Carlson Fundraising, LLC. It is my pleasure to welcome also here on the Nonprofit Coach, Greg Carlson.
It's good to be with you and your listeners again today, Ted.
It's great to have you folks back here on the show. Of course, we always change the date and time to make sure that we're aligned with your plans to make these announcements. This is the first announcement here on the Nonprofit Coach. So, gentlemen, I'm going to let you folks decide who's going to make the announcement first, but let's go with what people look at first. What are the top-line numbers? What happened to total giving in the United States last year?
Greg, you're the chair of the foundation. Why don't you lead off?
Thanks, Peter. Well, Ted, we have good news. In 2012, for the year that we are reporting, total giving in the U.S. reached the point of $316 billion. That's with a B, just over $316 billion. And that represents a 3.5% increase over giving in 2011. Adjusted for inflation, that's 1.5% as an increase.
That's really incredible numbers and not entirely expected. Were you folks surprised at GivingUSA to see that strong showing?
Well, we're very pleased in that this really represents the third consecutive year of increased growth since the depths of the Great Recession, hitting its low in 2009. So we're very pleased that we've continued an increase in digging out of where we've been.
That's incredible numbers. And Peter, give a little bit of context. Greg is mentioning that this is continuing growth. Is this strong growth? Is this strong enough to meet the needs of the sector and meet the needs of people who demand and need services from our sector?
Well, I would call the growth positive, but frankly somewhat modest. I think we're happy that it is 3 consecutive years of growth, as Greg noted. When you adjust for inflation, it's really a little bit less than 3.5%. And when we look at the history of philanthropy, if you adjust for inflation, it'll probably take at this rate of growth, another 6 or 7 years to get where we were prior to the recession. So, it's good news, but we always want to be working to build philanthropy as much as possible. The economy is the greatest indicator of philanthropy, and the S&P 500 was up in double digits last year, but there were some other statistics that moderated things. Unemployment hovered at 8.1%. The 50-year average is 6.1%. Personal income went up, I think, 3.3%, and personal consumption, which is probably the greatest indicator of philanthropy because it reflects how people feel about their security and their ability to invest, increased, I think, around 3.6%. So we're really looking for the economic momentum to sustain itself enough for people to feel confident, and then I think that growth could continue, and I think it could really increase in the coming years.
Well, and we actually need it to. As you said, the estimates are that it could take until 2018 just to recover. And, of course, the needs have been so great and continue to grow throughout that period of time. So as positive as this news is, and, of course, we're all pleased to see third straight year of gains, it's relatively modest gains in light of what's being demanded of the sector. Is that correct, Peter?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. There are some interesting things that happen if you follow this data. It's remarkable to me that if you go back to the recession, when the stock market dropped by 60%, that giving to human services actually went up. And what that shows is that people really do respond to basic human needs. Another really positive statistic is that 2 out of 3 households give something every year. We're able to note from the data, though, that 80% of all giving from individuals is by itemizers, people probably who have a little bit more wealth, a little bit more complicated financial situation. So there's broad response to the needs in philanthropy, and we think that if the economy can continue to grow, that we're going to see even greater response in the future. But this is good news. This is 3 consecutive years of growth, so we continue on our recovery here.
Well, and philanthropy is a strong sector. It's a resilient sector in the U.S. economy. But one of the concerns I think that a lot of folks have is that over time and currently it hovers around 2% of the economy, and demands continue to grow. Is that sort of a stubborn number that's not likely to change, or are there things that can happen that you see within the numbers that could change that 2%?
Historically, Ted, it has hovered around the 2% mark, as you point out. There's incremental things that can be done, investment and continuing fundraising growth activities. One of the things that I point to as a real game changer is the Giving Pledge that I'm sure you and your listeners are familiar with in terms of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates challenging other mega wealthy to consider giving away at least half of their income prior to their death. In the U.S. this past June, we just hit the point where we have 100 Giving Pledge donors. And it's difficult to value the estimate of these folks, but roughly speaking, they're looking at over $500 billion. Well, if they all give away at least half, and many have pledged to do even more than that, you're talking about $250 billion. Well, that kind of giving can really move the needle.
Nearly, at least in the ballpark of a total year of giving of all sources.
Exactly right. So it's always going to be a combination of those breakthrough ideas, the Giving Pledge, coupled with the incremental change you can make just with your basic blocking and tackling, day in and day out, best fundraising practices.
We're going to...
One of the interesting things about that the Giving Pledge to which Greg referred is that in the end, it's really about volunteer leadership. And so this is something, to move the needle in folks who are listening who work in maybe smaller, modest nonprofits. How do we move the needle? Engage volunteers. It's a way to get peers talking to peers. And I think what's interesting about this Giving Pledge is there are a few people who decided they were going to do this, and then they went and started talking to others one-on-one about why they'd chosen to make this kind of commitment. It really is, Greg, I agree with you, it really is dramatic.
And really, it's those kinds of ideas, as Greg said, that can move the needle and more importantly, I think, inspire people of goodwill to make an important difference in our philanthropic sector. We certainly know the needs are there. Gentlemen, we're going to take a quick station break here. When we come back, I want to delve into the numbers because Greg just brought up the importance of volunteer leadership, and I think helping volunteers understand how philanthropy works, where the money comes from, and where the money goes is extremely important. So if you just hang tight, we'll be right back after the break. Our guests are so important, and the information that they are sharing is so vital to all of our organizations. We're going to keep this station break very, very short, and that is just to remind you of upcoming programming here on the Nonprofit Coach. Next week, June 25th at 12 noon Eastern, our regular time here for the Nonprofit Coach, Jen Fila and Helen Brown will be here to talk about prospect research. That will be our final show before our summer break. As you know, here on the Nonprofit Coach, we always take July and August off because we figure all of you have better things to do than to listen to the Nonprofit Coach, and I can guarantee you that your host has better things planned. But it is a great time for you to catch up on the hundreds of podcasts here on the Nonprofit Coach, and in particular, the top 10 shows of all time. We will be on summer hiatus from June 26th, returning to you for our fall schedule, returning on September 10th. So make sure that you are following us on Twitter, that you are linked to us on LinkedIn, that you are getting the newsletter at p2pfundraising.org so that you get all of the announcements as we come back with a very exciting fall lineup on September 10th. So don't forget, next week is our last show before our summer hiatus. And with that, we've got too much to talk about. We're heading back over to page 2.
Remember, our podcasts and archives are always available 24 hours a day at tedhart.com. Click on Radio Links. If you're listening live today, the phone lines are open. Call in and ask a question by dialing 347-324-3080. Now, back to the Nonprofit Coach with Ted Hart.
And live here on the Nonprofit Coach, we have Greg Carlson and Peter Fissinger. Gentlemen, you were just talking about the need for volunteer leadership, the importance of volunteer leadership, and I wanted to get into the numbers. You just made the big announcement here on the Nonprofit Coach, first in the nation, the $316.23 billion with a B dollars were donated from American individuals, corporations, and foundations. This represents, in a slow economy, the third straight year of gains. Beneath the numbers, though, we see growth in three important areas: individuals, corporations, and foundations. I want you to speak to that, but we also saw a decline in bequests. So, gentlemen, can you help us make sense of the growth areas, what that means and what that says to you and should to our volunteer and professional leadership, but also the decline in bequests?
Go ahead, Greg.
Thanks, Peter. Ted, it's been true for the last 58 years that GivingUSA has been putting out the annual report, and that is that individuals far and away give the majority of money in this country. Some outside of the nonprofit sector sometimes thinks it's corporations or family foundations, et cetera, but really the vast majority are individuals, American households giving the money, and that's approximately 72% of all giving. And for 2012, that was actually an increase of nearly 4% of overall giving coming from families and individuals.
The number that yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying when you add in the bequest section of that, was growth from individuals still strong?
Well, if you look at the growth was, again, it's the third consecutive year of growth, and so if you look at individual giving, the numbers usually are very close to what the overall growth in giving is. So we're talking about a significantly synonymous pool here. And again, the growth is positive. We think it can accelerate in coming years if the economy continues to stabilize and grow. But I want to build on what Greg said about individual giving. If you look at the 72% that individuals drive and then add the 7% that is included from bequests, which are recently deceased individuals, and then on top of that, it's estimated that about 6% of foundation giving is, about 45% of all foundation giving is family foundations, and so that adds another 6% to the total. It's really 86% of giving being driven by individuals. Just a note on the bequest statistic. This is the area that fluctuates the most, and so it actually is down a little bit this year, but if you look, 2 years ago there was a $2.5 billion request made by Margaret Cargill to her family foundation, and that moved the needle on both the bequest category and the giving to foundations category.
So it really, of course you can't predict, and it's less of a straight line because it does depend on when wealthy people pass away and what decisions they have made in their estate planning.
it does depend, obviously, on when wealthy people pass away. But one of the things we saw during the recession is that organizations that budgeted some time to work on their planned giving program every week, every month, every year fared a little bit better during the recession. And this is one I like to equate it with an exercise program, that in addition to all the other things you have to do every day, if you can invest a little bit of time, you may not see the return right away, but eventually you're going to see the benefits. And so even though it's a smaller piece of the pie, we recommend organizations really try to even just build a humble bequest program if you can, because planned giving can be a way to stabilize the giving to your organization when you're having challenges in other areas.
Well, and I think that's such an important point that you make. I often point out to folks that I provide counsel to that, it's almost seen as a windfall for a lot of organizations when they suddenly are notified of a bequest. Maybe they didn't know that was coming. Someone had made those plans. But rare is it the case that there was no contact with the organization at all. In other words, somebody somewhere along the line had built that relationship. Someone somewhere along the line was doing that yeoman's work that was so important to making that bequest possible. And so if you're not doing that now, then future development officers, CEOs, and others who are counting on that influx of funds at some point won't have those same benefits.
Completely agree.
That's good. So giving by corporations grew by a very large number, and of course we're making the caveat here that it is a smaller part of overall giving from the incredible generosity of individuals in the United States who really carry and shoulder the weight of philanthropy. But corporate giving is important and does continue to grow, and it rose by 12.2%. Any story behind the story?
This is Greg Ted. Overall, corporate pre-tax profits increased in 2012 about 16.6%, which is the third year of increase. We've all been hearing about record profits in corporate America. GivingUSA finds that giving by corporation really tracks pre-tax profit growth, but lags by about a year or two. And so we've continued to see an increase in corporate giving, really following the increase in pre-tax profits and American corporations doing well.
So we see, if I'm understanding you correctly, we see almost an immediate impact on the good fortune of individuals tracking to philanthropy. But good fortune for corporations, while it does come to the philanthropic sector, it does lag.
Yeah, our findings are that it's a year and a half to 2 years because of the budgeting process often with corporate America, with their budgets being fixed a month before the beginning of whatever their fiscal year is, and then they don't really revisit their giving strategies until it becomes budget time again.
Okay. And what about the work of foundations? Where does that fit into the overall, the growth there, I believe, was 4.4%. How does that track year over year, and are foundations giving as they should?
Foundation giving also tracks over a longer period than any given fiscal year. We found during the recession that many foundations were able to sustain their giving. Some of them dipped into assets, but more importantly, they tend to give out of assets based on as much as a 15-quarter rolling average. And so we wouldn't expect the foundation giving to spike at the rate of the S&P 500. They do give based on the value of their assets, but they do it over a longer period of time to even out the response to the value of those assets. In addition, as I said earlier, 45% of this category is family foundations, and so we would expect perhaps that the giving from that sector, that part of the foundation sector, might reflect what's happening in individual giving a little bit more closely than just the foundation giving strategy of giving out of the percentage of one's assets.
what is, you said that, if I'm understanding you correctly, that represents 45% of total foundation giving is linked to family foundations?
Approximately, that's the estimate.
And is a good portion of that also linked to the bequest number, or is that more of a top-line philanthropy number?
It can be linked to the bequest number in a given year, but if you look over a longer period of time, where the sources of giving, what you've seen is a modest reduction in individual giving and a corresponding increase in foundation giving. And the reason for that, we believe, is that wealthy individuals are transferring assets into family foundations. So the overall statistic hasn't really changed. It's just where that money's coming from is changing. And another thing about that frankly, I think is really positive is people who are creating family foundations are also often being very strategic in involving multi-generation family members in the giving decisions, and they really want to pass the practice of philanthropy on to their children and grandchildren. What that can mean for charities is they have to be careful to understand that there may not be just one decision maker. There might be multiple decision makers, and they may cover multiple generations in seeking a gift from a family foundation.
So it is more complex, but can oftentimes be very important level of giving. Now, when you look inside the numbers, which is what we want to do and help our listeners understand, I'm wondering if you can help us draw the parallel. Now, I understand foundation giving overall is growing, and 45% of that foundation number is linked to family foundations. However, giving to foundations declines by 4.6%. Is this a relationship to possibly an influence of donor-advised funds? And where do those funds fit within the overall giving?
In a couple of ways, Ted. Peter referenced the Cargill gift in 2011 skewing things. That's a factor even in looking at foundation giving in 2012. So in 2011, there was a $2.5 billion gift to the Cargill Foundation. We did not have that mega kind of gift to a foundation in 2012. So you do get some of those fluctuations as a result of mega gift giving. But you're right, Ted. There is a bit of a draw away from perhaps foundations, and particularly family foundations, to the donor-advised funds. We're talking here about the Fidelities, Vanguard, Schwab type products that are out there. Exactly right.
Or CAF America, which also is a donor-advised fund. So in relationship there, are you saying that take away the influence of the Cargill gift, would that be relatively flat for foundation giving?
Exactly. I would say that foundation giving relatively is flat if you factor out the Cargill gift from 2011.
Giving to religion is also virtually flat, and this has been a trend for a few years. Is there any story behind that story?
I think there's a very interesting story behind that, and in fact, the longer-term trend is that this area of giving is declining. There was a research study that came out last year that suggested that found more Americans are describing themselves as unaffiliated with any church or synagogue than ever before. Along with that, there are fewer Americans who are going to church or synagogue every single week, and therefore giving to this sector might be declining. I think the larger picture there perhaps is that there might be a dialogue here about the extent to which, if at all, that could impact philanthropy in the future, because some people see giving to religion as the birthplace of philanthropy. It's where people belong to a community. They go every week as a family. They're encouraged to give. They give to their church or synagogue, and those churches and synagogues also support human service entities, and some think that's where people learn to give. So if giving to this sector is declining, could that impact philanthropy? The flip side of that is that philanthropy has matured to the point where people don't have to be anchored in that sector in order to be very generous, and there's a lot of data to support that as well. As chair on the Council of Methodology, we're going to be creating a task force to look into this area of giving more carefully and see if we can find some answers that will reflect the overall giving trends. But it's really quite interesting.
Yeah, well, I find it absolutely fascinating, and I'm so glad that you're going to be looking into the methodology of how that is tracked, because I do wonder, and this is just something I wonder if you've given some thought to. You mentioned the maturing of the philanthropic sector, and I think that when you look at the history of religion and giving to religion, in many cases, oftentimes that was giving to a church that then would provide certain services or would dole out those funds to things like the community human service organizations, health organizations, certainly public society benefit. And so in a small way, in some communities, the church was sort of the conduit through which other philanthropic efforts would be supported. And now that there's a diversification, and I call it more of a personalizing of philanthropy, that people now give directly to other charities, is it more of an issue that it's not so much a decline of religious giving, it's that people are giving directly to other charities that might in the past have been receiving money from religious organizations?
I think it's a very good point, Ted, and yes, I would agree that that's happening. Peter and I are old enough, and we have enough gray hair now that we remember when giving to religion was over 50%, close to 55% of GivingUSA's famous pie chart. And now in 2012, we're showing that at 32%. But we've seen increases in human services giving, as Peter referenced earlier, as well as other sectors. So I think you really put your finger on that there's a bit of a transfer in how this money is being reflected and counted. That said, Peter's point about attendance being down for houses of worship, et cetera, it just has to be having an impact overall on faith-based giving.
Mm-hmm.
I think the larger question here... Sorry. I was going to say, I think the larger question here could be, where do people learn to give? And I do think that we're seeing, for instance, in a wide range of educational-related entities, programs on philanthropy. And so hopefully that teaching and learning about philanthropy will continue to thrive, even if regular attendance at houses of worship declines, and I think that will happen. But I do think that it's worth some careful inspection.
Well, I would absolutely agree with you, because I think it's again I just sort of posit that the story behind the story here is more a diversification and a personalization of philanthropy, because you see the same thing. Again, you're pointing to your gray hair and remembering days gone by. There was also a day that the United Way was far more influential in terms of how philanthropy was managed within a community, and that has declined as well. And I don't think it's an indication of a lack of philanthropy within a community. It's just how it's being measured and how it's being given.
Well, first of all, let me just say that Greg's being very kind in describing my gray hair, because he knows that I have hardly any hair at all. But anyway, back to the main topic. United Way giving has struggled. If you look at public society benefit giving, it's actually up this year, and so those organizations have struggled to reorganize. And frankly, there's some evidence that they're starting to make progress. Historically, United Way has relied on workplace giving, and there's significant evidence that workplace giving just isn't quite as strong or powerful as it used to be, and frankly, it's a little bit more competitive. But the idea that somebody might give to an entity who would decide where the money would best be used is still compelling to some in this country. And so public society benefit giving actually rose a little bit last year.
Exactly. Gentlemen, this is fascinating, but we do have a caller. I want to make sure that the caller gets an opportunity to spend time with you as well. Caller, area code 201, you're live here on the Nonprofit Coach.
Oh, Ted, this is Susan McDermott holding for you.
Oh, Susan, hey, wonderful. I didn't recognize.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your conversation. Keep going.
No, that's great. I'm sure that, okay, Susan McDermott from John Wiley & Sons. Susan, I'm sure you've got a great question. We've got Greg Carlson and Peter Fissinger. I know that you're also here to talk about next week's show. So why don't we just roll all that together, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask these two experts on giving in the United States, since you sit in such an important seat of education.
I regret to say that I actually just joined the call and wasn't privy to the entire conversation.
That's okay. Well, we have Greg Carlson, Peter Fissinger. They're here making the national announcement of the GivingUSA 2013 numbers. So sorry to catch you a little bit off guard. I saw you on.
I'm so sorry.
The clipboard there. So we're just a little bit off schedule because I know, Susan, you're running behind. So very quickly, I know that you came on to make the announcement for next week's show, which is our last show before the summer hiatus. So quickly, why don't we have you do that, and we'll get back to our topic.
Yeah, thank you. So next week, and thank you again for being such a support to the series, the AFP Fund Development Series. And next week, your guests will be Jennifer Filla and Helen Brown, who are the authors of Prospect Research for Fundraisers, which basically offers essential tools for implementing right-sized prospect research techniques to help nonprofit organizations reach their fundraising goals. And I think your listeners are really going to take some valuable content away from that talk.
Well, and I think a particularly timely talk to take us into the summer hiatus, because that's a great time for research to be done, to be reaching out to donors, to have very casual and sort of fun time getting to know donors a little bit more. So I think it's good timing. Susan, I know that we got a little bit off schedule, so I want to thank you for making a point of coming on the show and making sure that we're properly prepared for next week's show.
Thanks, Ted. I'm sorry. I think that was my mistake, and I apologize.
Yeah, well, we're an hour off from our normal schedule, so don't worry about it. But I do also just want to say have a wonderful summer, because you and I will speak again in September.
We sure will, Ted. You take care. Thank you so much for being so supportive.
You bet. I'm sorry, gentlemen. That was Susan McDermott. She was live from John Wiley & Sons. We do a monthly series called the AFP Wiley Radio Show here on the Nonprofit Coach, where authors from the AFP Development Series are here on the show offering their information. So I got a little bit off schedule there. We're right back now with Greg Carlson and Peter Fissinger on the absolutely fascinating numbers behind the numbers. So, gentlemen, we're back. We were talking about where the money is coming from, but if you don't mind, could you help us understand where the money is going? Are there big changes? Are there growth factors? Or some areas not as popular maybe as they have been in the past?
Ted, one of the deeper dives on the numbers reveals, I think, something very interesting, and it ties back into a discussion of building back from our lows of the 2009 recession. And that is, we've had two subsectors actually achieve or surpass their record all-time highs of 2007. And those two subsectors are health and then, secondly, human services. So each of those two subsectors have really built all the way back to their pre-recession highs.
And, of course, those are two areas that, with the aging of our population and the needs of the poor, continue to be called upon to provide even more service. So that's a positive sign to the philanthropic sector, wouldn't you say?
I absolutely do. And coupled in the healthcare, of course, we've had quite a healthcare debate and discussion in this country going on for the last 4+ years. So it's interesting that that sector continues to reach out for support to its family base and succeed, really now approaching record levels.
And again, does this go back? No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is Peter. I was just wanted to build on Greg's comment that if you look at where the money's going and what the positive trends are, there are three sectors: education, arts, culture, and humanities, and environment and animals, that saw growth almost double in the case of arts and culture, or more than double the overall trend of 3.5%. And what that suggests, I think, is that there is a growing tendency of some wealthier folks who have appreciated assets making larger, maybe even transformational gifts. And those gifts tend to go to sectors like education, arts and culture, and environment and animals. The arts and culture sector was affected most negatively by the recession. And we know that donors in that sector tend to be slightly more educated than the general donor population, tend to be wealthier than the average donor, and tend to live in urban areas. And there's anecdotal evidence that those people, when a recession hits, are among the folks who turn strongly toward giving to basic human needs. And then when their assets are doing well, they think about big gifts that could, really strengthen the art museum in their town, or maybe a performing arts center. And so we see big gifts to that entity as the market does well. And so between the two areas that Greg noted have gotten to their pre-recession highs, and these other three areas that are moving faster than the overall average, I think there's some pretty good news there.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that sector of the philanthropic marketplace, and in some communities, was nearly decimated. So the kind of growth that they're seeing now, is that bringing them back to pre-recession numbers, or are they still struggling to meet those numbers?
I don't have that exact number, but I know they haven't gotten back to their pre-recession level yet. The two that Greg noted are the two that have.
Yeah, well, that's very positive news, because as we all know, arts and culture are extremely important to the fabric of many of our communities. And it's good to know that philanthropy is starting to flow back there. Education, human services, again, those along with healthcare organizations. I just wonder if that is part of the story behind the story, with people giving more personally, giving more directly, creating those relationships directly with charities, as opposed to necessarily giving through religious organizations or giving through other entities, which I think in years past was much more prevalent as sort of a filter for philanthropy, and those filters don't seem to be holding up over time.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that's a trend, or that's something that is a good theory, but maybe we need to survey that a little bit more?
This is Greg. I very much agree. I very much agree with you, Ted, that that we're counting the money differently because the money is being given to different sources. All sectors have grown. Even religion has grown. It's a smaller percentage of the overall pie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Speak to one of the other areas that has seen growth over the last few years, and that's international giving outside of the United States. How is that faring more recently, and what's the trend line been looking like?
Well, the rate of growth in international giving slowed down quite a bit this year. It's to your point, it's over a 10-year period, is the fastest growing use, if you will, of giving, or destination for people's giving. That did slow down last year. We think that there are a couple of different things going on. For one, some international giving every year is driven by a significant sort of disaster that attracts global philanthropic attention. And fortunately, there was nothing dramatic like that in the past year. But I think the larger
like
picture,
a tsunami or an earthquake or something of that sort. So you're saying that
right.
can be the difference between growth and just continued moderation.
I think that it's some of the difference, but I do think or we think that the longer-term trend is that this is a growing destination for philanthropy. And I think what it reflects is that as donors mature, to your point, and give directly to the things they care about, they're also viewing themselves as global citizens more and more. And they don't necessarily think that a problem on the other side of the world is not their problem to try and help solve. And that's a very interesting trend in philanthropy, where people used to just look in their neighborhood. You know, it really started with their family, then their neighborhood, then their community. We now have donors who are trying to impact change across the globe, not the least of whom, by the way, is Bill Gates and his wife,
right.
Melinda.
Right. Yeah. Well, and my listeners know that I serve as CEO of the Charities Aid Foundation of America, capamerica.org, and we saw an 80% increase year over year. Principally, most of our work is international, helping American corporations and individuals, foundations as well, to make a difference internationally, and we see that continuing to grow, and quite honestly, we see the trend line continuing to grow. So I think that 10-year average that GivingUSA is looking at is going to continue to be strong. Gentlemen, as is always the case when we have such a fascinating topic and incredible guests, we are nearing the end of the show, so I want to make sure that in the 3 minutes remaining here on the show, the two folks share your advice on how should volunteer leaders and professional leaders for organizations use the numbers that you brought to us today. What does this mean?
Well, Ted, this is Greg. If your listeners were to go to GivingUSA.org, they'd have an opportunity to do a couple of things. One is we offer a complimentary, that's free, executive summary of the GivingUSA data, and so they'd be able to download that information and study that further. Beyond that, we do a much deeper dive through the actual report that your listeners would be able to order. And further, there is the PowerPoint slides that include commentary, and we've added additional, if you will, presenters' notes to the PowerPoint presentation that illustrates our famous pie charts and graphs. I strongly recommend that your listeners consider during their next board meeting sharing this information. These PowerPoints are well organized and laid out, and in a very 15-minute kind of fashion, your listeners would be able to educate their board members as to the broad brush, big picture of what we've been discussing today. And again, you can get that at GivingUSA.org.
And we're providing a link to GivingUSA.org in the radio links at tedhart.com today for this show. And, of course, providing that information can help every board of directors across the country understand where their personal work in their own community does fit on a national and international scale.
It's well said.
So, Greg Carlson, Peter Fissinger, thank you so much for being my guest here. We're honored to have the fine folks at the Giving Institute and GivingUSA, in particular for the third year in a row, to use the Nonprofit Coach radio show as an opportunity to make these important national announcements regarding the golden standard for data on the philanthropic sector. Gentlemen, thank you for being my guest here on the Nonprofit Coach.
Ted, thanks for all you do.
Thanks for having us.
Great to have you. You bet, always, and we'll look forward to next year's announcements. Don't forget, our final show for this season is next week. That announcement was made by Susan McDermott. We'll be back next week, and then we'll be wishing you a wonderful summer. This has been the Nonprofit Coach Special Edition, GivingUSA 2013. Take care, gentlemen. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Nonprofit Coach Radio Show with Ted Hart. Tell all your friends to check out our production schedule and download our iPod and iPad-friendly podcast at tedhart.com. Thanks for listening to the Nonprofit Coach.